Hey, it's Father Roderick, and here is my spoiler-free review of Chapter 3 of the Book of Boba Fett. So don't worry if you haven't seen the episode yet. I'm going to give you general impressions. I have a lot to say, though, even though I will avoid spoilers. And the main question I want to answer for you is this episode what you expect it to be? Is this as good as the previous one? Is it worth your time? Well, if you are watching this, then probably that doesn't matter what I say, because you will watch it anyway. But I may be able to help you to enjoy the episode better if you know a few things in advance. Again, no spoilers. So let's dive into it. I'm going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly of this episode. Let's start with the good. This is an amazing episode when it comes to action sequences. It's very different in character to the previous two chapters that were really meant to set up things, give you a lot of kind of mythology of the series. It's almost like an origin story of the new Boba Fett. This third chapter plunges us into the action and into the plot of the entire series, and the plot thickens. That is one of the major advantages of this new episode. It finally starts we start to discover what is going on or what might be going on. It's got a lot of intrigue that it's setting up. And I feel that the story is now finally beginning, truly beginning. I love the first two episodes because of its origin story and the mythological elements. But now we're really into the thick of the action, and that is, I think, perfect timing. So that is absolutely great. The story is really starting to get more intriguing, more interesting. There are a number of action scenes in this third episode that are going to blow you away. It definitely blew me away, especially the first one. And there is also an emotional scene in this episode that I did not see coming at all, and it just knocked me over. It was so incredibly emotional, and you'll know it when you see it. It's heavy stuff, as Marty McFly would say. It's heavy. I also loved a few cameos. I'll get to that a little bit later, again, without spoiling. And there is a lot of backstory that is developed, just like they did in the first two episodes. But this time it's not of peoples that live on Tatooine. It's the backstory of a creature, of a monster. And it is fantastic what they've done. This is another episode that is must see if you want to kind of reinterpret what you saw in The Return of the Jedi. That's always what I love about these television series, when they give you a bit of backstory that helps you experience existing movies in a different way. And I'm sure that there are a number of things, I can't talk about it because it's spoiler related, but I will later on in one of my deep dive videos, that really gives a new spin to something that we saw in Return of the Jedi. And I think it's brilliant. For that alone, this episode or this chapter is really, really amazing. What I also loved is that they, again, successfully include a number of tropes, both from the Western movie genre, and it's one of the things that was still lacking. We've seen a lot of obvious references and homages to the old Western movies, but there's one trope that needs to be in every good Western movie and even video game, and has to do with taming horses. I will say no more, but that returns here, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is such a cool idea what they do here with that trope. I loved it. And then, of course, there is also all the tropes related to the Mafia movies. You know, all these different crime lords that are trying to control a city, and, well, all the complexities that come with it, and the power struggles, all that, all those ideas from the Mafia movies and video games are, I think, very well included here and integrated into the fabric of the story of the Book of Boba Fett. Number two, everything starts to widen. In the beginning of this episode, I thought, they're making a small episode. they were hinting at, oh, this is just going to take place in a small, in a limited environment. And then towards the end of this episode, all of a sudden there's this widening, and it brings it to literally a huge new scale that I did not expect. And it is making me very curious to see where they're going to take this, because, well, again, I expected this story of the Book of Boba Fett to stay relatively small, since we are confined to the planet of Tatooine, and the only other places we visit is in flashbacks. But all of a sudden, this feels more. There was a scene towards the end that reminded me very much of certain sequences in the prequels, and especially in the third prequel. And so I was like, whoa! I did not expect that to happen in basically a TV episode about one guy. Well, and of course about Fennec as well. So and what I also really loved about this chapter is that not only does the plot thicken, but you get multiple suspects. There are multiple people that could be behind what's happening, and you don't know what it is. So this is the first chapter in the series that really makes me scratch my head, and I want to speculate. I want to talk about this. And I'm going to do Star Wars videos every day from now until the next episode. I'm going to release them all at 5 o'clock Central European time. That's my time. I'm in the Netherlands, so that would be 17 minus 6. It's like 11 o'clock in the morning for those of you on the East Coast, and it's going to be 8 o'clock in the morning for those of you living on the West Coast of the United States. So, but there is so much material, there's so much I want to talk about and explain to you why I think this chapter, despite its appearances, because again, you will have certain thoughts about this episode, but hear me out. This episode is way more important than you think, and it gives us some, I think, essential clues that can indicate where they are going to take this story and what the implications will be. And I think the implications are massive. That's all I'm going to say. So don't judge this episode too quickly as being too short or disappointing, or it didn't do what I thought it would do. There is something else going on. This is a setup for something really important, I think, towards the end of the series, and you will appreciate this episode way more once you see how it will unfold. And I've got some theories about that I'm going to share with you in one of my future videos. I can't obviously here because this is supposed to be spoiler free. What else is good? Number 3, I like it that we're kind of winding down the flashback scenes. There's still one, very important one, but we are starting to move away from the origin story in the flashbacks, that it's all necessary to establish how Boba Fett becomes the new Boba Fett, basically. And we are going to tone down the mythology, all the metaphors, and we're starting to see the action. We're starting to finally see the story. So I like that new balance of the series in this episode. Number 4, what else is good? There are some massive surprises, visual surprises, like cameos, and there were a number of times, if you've watched my watch party video, that you can sync up with the episode and you can see my first reaction. And there were a few moments where I was like, oh my goodness, oh, that is so incredibly cool. Wow. And that happened multiple times. If only for that, I have to commend the writers of this episode, because they were genuine surprises. And Disney is always good at keeping secrets, but now you understand why that is so important, because if stuff like this would have leaked before, it wouldn't have had the same impact. So, oh, you're in for such a treat this episode. Let me just vaguely describe what you're in for without spoiling anything. There is one action scene that I hoped, based on the previous chapter, I hoped to see it. I wasn't sure if we were going to see it in this episode already, or if they would keep that for later on. But it's very, 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 very cool, and a lot of you are going to be super happy with what happens. So that's one action scene. Then there is a surprising return of a creature that we all love. That's all I'm going to say. But this surprise reintroduction of a creature that we all love comes with a fantastic twist to its role in this series, because this is not the only chapter that we will see where this creature is going to have a role, I think. So it's a twist to its role and a twist to its backstory, and this is one of those things that will make you want to go back to Return of the Jedi and rewatch that movie, and you will feel different about certain scenes. I guarantee you. This is also, this second surprise. It's a great payoff of something that they were teasing in chapter 2, but we didn't get it. And I was frustrated about that, I was like, oh, they're just playing with us. And I thought they would leave it at that, but no, there is a payoff of that. And gosh, I'm really kudos to the writers for doing that. Number 3, surprise number 3, a cameo of a great actor, of one of my favorite movie actors when it comes to the action genre, someone who can play a whole range of different people, instantly recognizable. Like, I was like, no, is that? No, it has to be. I mean, this is, and then I looked it up, and of course it was the actor that I seem to recognize, and he is great. He's so great. I'm so excited that this actor is now joining the Star Wars universe. I mean, I couldn't have dreamt of a better cameo. And I think, again, we'll see him in future episodes as well. It's really, really cool. And then the fourth surprise is a shocking one, is a very emotional one. It's a scene that I never hoped to see. And it is, I think it has massive consequences. I also think that there is more to this emotional scene than you may think. I have a theory about this scene, about what we see, but also what we don't see in this sequence. And I think it's going to have massive implications for the way this series will end. I have a pretty detailed theory about that, fan theory about that. And I want to give you some of my ideas as soon as I can talk spoilers and you have had the occasion to see this episode. So stay tuned for that. So, shocking scene, I did not expect it, nor did I really want this scene. I didn't want to see it, but I understand why they did it. There are multiple reasons why this scene is in this chapter, and I also want to explain that later on, one of my future videos. But it is, that's definitely the emotional core of this particular episode. And then the last surprise in this episode is a sudden increase of the stakes towards the end. So it's this broadening of the story visually. The implications are massive. This story is bigger than I thought. All right, what else is good? I have to talk about the music. Of course, the music is great. It's got the same vibe as in The Mandalorian. It's got different themes, but in every episode there is one sequence, there's one piece of music that blows me away. And in this case, it was the composition for this emotional scene that I hinted at. It is a choral piece, and it is brilliant. It's beautiful. It's so fitting. It's something we haven't heard before in Star Wars music, when it comes to Star Wars music, but it totally works, and it really enhances the emotional impact of what you see. So huge props to the composer for that music. What else did I really, really like? What else is really good about this chapter? Some of the establishing shots. Now, Star Wars has to have these establishing shots where you pan down to a planet, or there is like a sunrise or a sunset, and then you do a close-up. And iconic. Every movie has these iconic landscapes that you see. And this chapter is no exception. There are a few beautiful shots, one especially of Mos Espa that was, well, there was already this fantastic establishing shot of Mos Espa by day. This is another establishing shot, or it's actually a moving shot. And well, it's gorgeous. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And I almost felt sorry that it was so short. This is the kind of stuff that I guess just want to revel in. Just let me look at that for a minute or two. And then there is a second establishing shot that is also really beautiful, and it's a sunrise on Tatooine. And I mean, I'm so surprised to see how many different atmospheres, this pretty boring planet. I mean, it's just sand, but they are coming up with new looks to this planet. And this sunrise was one of them. And it's just gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Okay, what else is good of this episode? There are a lot of practical set pieces. There are some vehicles that are not CGI. They're practical. They're built specifically for this chapter, for this episode. It looks amazing, and I applaud them for doing that. There are also some creatures that are practical and not CGI, even though CGI would have been much more, probably faster, cheaper to do, but they chose to just build physical creatures or parts of the creatures. And so the acting, of course, benefits from practical props and vehicles. Also has a downside. We'll get to that when I talk about the bad and maybe the ugly. But I love it that they are building so much for these chapters, and I can't wait to just go to the big Star Wars museum. Isn't George Lucas building a big museum? Like, I want to see all these props for real, you know. It's just so cool that again, after the prequels and everything was green screen and blue screen, now we get to have all these props again. It is a long tradition in Star Wars movie making to have these props and miniatures. And I want to see them for real. Okay, so that doesn't say that there isn't any CGI, and especially the creatures that are done in CGI, I think are still really good, especially if you keep in mind that this is a TV show. There's a little bit of CGI that is, for me, part of the ugly, but you'll have to wait and see what I have to say about that. Then, what else is so good about this episode? I'm only going to say one thing. Star Wars food. We'll see a lot of Star Wars food, and it looks amazing. It looks so good. And this warrants a new Star Wars cookbook. There are already some Star Wars cookbooks out there. We need to have a new series. Actually, you could do, you know, this is a free idea for Disney. Do a Star Wars cooking show. It will be a hit. I guarantee you that. This is so cool. I mean, why haven't they done that? That's such a perfect genre for a spin-off of Star Wars. Just do a cooking show with real chefs making, you can even dress them up, you know, use actors or something like that, or do like a mix. This could also be a children's show. Just do a cooking show where children have to recreate some of the food that we see in this chapter. I guarantee you people will watch it. Anyway, Star Wars food. I'm wondering about the Star Wars food. Why is it in this chapter? I have some ideas. Again, I will explain later in a future video. So subscribe to this channel because you don't want to miss those videos. Again, every day at 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 o'clock Eastern Time. We also get very good dialogue and very good acting, especially Tim Morrison and Ming-Na Wen as Fennec. That chemistry just clicks. It just works, and it's perfect. I'm so happy with these two main actors, and they're not exaggerating. In every interview they say that we just had chemistry, and that's not hyperbole. That is absolutely visible here, and it's funny. It's just really well paced. There are some really funny visual jokes in this chapter and nods to Return of the Jedi, and I think they worked really, really well. And it's classic Star Wars. That's the kind of humor that sometimes George Lucas could be brilliant at. Not always. Sometimes it would be a little bit too slapsticky. Think of Jar Jar in the prequels. But he also had these iconic moments where it's just his little joke, an extra. It doesn't contribute to the story, but it's just the humor that makes Star Wars Star Wars. You need to have that levity. And there are a couple of them in this chapter that I laughed out loud at. So there's one outside the palace of Boba Fett and one in the streets of Mos Espa featuring a droid that looks similar to another droid that we really, really like. And the behavior is very similar. So loved that little joke here. And there are also a couple of visual references to The Mandalorian. And you'll recognize it when you see it. And I love it. It's very, very cool. Another thing that is really good about this episode, the costumes. Fantastic, especially the pikes. Beautiful colors, very, very elaborate. Great costuming. Also, the digital costumes in certain scenes are very well done. And then there are 2 or 3 more other things that I want to mention before we go to the bad. And unfortunately, there is some bad in this chapter as well. First of all, there is a great homage to American Graffiti, which was the movie that actually put George Lucas on the map. It was a huge success, and it was actually his breakthrough box office success that gave people confidence in what he was doing with Star Wars, even though a lot of publishers and companies refused to do Star Wars with him, and he ultimately ended up paying for it himself. But it was thanks to the success of American Graffiti that he was able to actually make A New Hope. So, but also American Graffiti shows a number of things that George Lucas is obsessed with and really loves, and you will see it coming back over and over again. One general thing that we all know that George is always part of what George Lucas puts in his movies, cars. He loves his cars, especially the cars in, around the time of American Graffiti, the late 50s, early 60s. There's something about that aesthetic that comes back in the prequels. There are always car chases, races. Think of the pod races. Think of the race at the beginning of the Solo movie. This chapter pays homage to American Graffiti and to George Lucas' love for cars and car chases. Does it work, however? Stay tuned for the bad. There is also part of this American Graffiti homage is, I think, the birth of a new Star Wars Lego set. I was seeing this, I'm thinking, this is a Star Wars Lego set. Absolutely. Again, you'll know it when you see it. There is one actress that is introduced here for the first time. We've seen her in trailers and glimpses of the series, Sophie Thatcher. She plays a minor role here. And she's part of a group that is unlike any other group of characters that we've seen before in the Star Wars universe. It's a bit cyberpunky. And to me, my first reaction was Star Trek. Not Star Wars, Star Trek. This is something they took from Star Trek. Again, you'll know it when you see it. Let me know in the comments if you think I'm right or not. And then the final thing that is really always good in every episode, both of The Mandalorian, but also of the Book of Boba Fett, no exception here, is the beautiful sequence of pre-production artwork. It's just spectacular. I want these paintings in my house everywhere. It's gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. It's also really fascinating to see how much of that pre-production artwork they are able to translate to the TV screen. There was even one piece of pre-production artwork that shows you this creature and has a detail. Can't talk about it. Has a detail that they left out in the TV episode. Again, in one of my future videos, I'll explain what that detail is, why they probably left it out, but also why I think it's still a brilliant detail. Anyway, That's way too vague to be interesting. Let's go to the bad, because unfortunately, even though I was gushing over these first 2 chapters, this 3rd chapter, yes, unfortunately, there were also some things that for me did not work. Let's start with an overall assessment of the episode. To me, it felt very unbalanced. There are great action scenes. There are some really good pieces of exposition that put pieces in place that make me, be intrigued. But the ending is way too short. It's way too quick, way too abrupt. There is no reflection or lesson learned or even pace-wise, just like you have all that action in the middle segment of the chapter, but then you also need to help us to wind down a little bit. Don't stop like right after the action and then all of a sudden it's like, what? Is it already finished? How much time did that take? Especially because chapter 2 was so long. Now, of course, I know that Disney is not, because it's all on demand, they don't have to, every time hit like 25 minutes. And I really think that chapter 2 needed that longer, room to breathe. But after that long, fantastic episode, one of the best Star Wars episodes ever, this one was like, oh, come on. We just get going. You're setting up everything and there's no payoff. I would have been okay with a few changes in the editing. I'm an editor myself. I work in television. If there is one thing I could do, I'm not sure if you could do it story-wise, but emotionally, in terms of pacing, I would have taken this emotional scene that is right in between all these action scenes, and it feels cramped. It feels like it's way too short. And it's so emotional, kind of feels out of place. I would have taken that scene and I would have put it at the end of this episode as a big reveal and a big shocker. I think it would have spiked the ratings for this episode. I guarantee you. I'm currently reading a book about audienceology, which is all about how they use test audiences to make changes to the first edit of movies. And what I've learned from that is, and that is probably lacking in this case, because Disney is so secretive, they can't afford to do test audiences. But I'm sure that if they would have shown this to a test audience, and if I had been in a test audience, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, I would have told them, you know what, take that scene, put it towards the end, and everybody would be blown away. They didn't. Maybe there are reasons for that, and I need to rewatch it to see if it's even possible to do that. But I think this episode has no ending. And sure, the fact that I was like, what, is it over? Come on, it's too short, is also proof of how much I liked what I saw. But it still leaves me a bit like, I was still hungry after this episode. And I think it will reflect in how people will rate and appreciate this episode. So, it's got a certain good side to it, but also I felt that this was not balanced. All right, the second thing, acting, great for the main actors. There was one cameo in the beginning of the episode. I think it was Stephen Root from Office Space. And that was merely okay. It felt a bit rehearsed. The direction there was not optimal. So that surprised me a little bit, because most of the acting so far has been really top-notch, and then you immediately see it when it's, no, not convincing enough. I mean, it's a small, tiny role, so it's not that important, but it was a bit jarring after all the great acting that we've seen. Sounded a bit rehearsed. What did not work? Well, I talked previously about this American Graffiti homage. There's this whole sequence that clearly wants to evoke, what we see in American Graffiti, but it didn't work. The actual execution was lackluster, and I think it is because they tried to do it practically. They tried to build all these vehicles, and they put them on rails, or maybe had wheels underneath, and then they tinkered a little bit with using CGI. But because everything was practical, there's only so much that you can do on set. And it felt slow, it felt clunky. And I think one of the biggest disadvantages of Star Wars being such a big brand, and we've been playing these video games and we've seen animated sequences, and with animation you can do so much more than what you can do practically. And that's also true for CGI. Now, I commend them for doing practical effects, but I think this was the wrong choice. I think they should have done a number of these sequences with CGI because it's much easier to make it look spectacular, and now it just felt like I can almost see how they did it. And it also echoes a scene at the beginning of the Solo movie, where you have almost an identical chase sequence, and the Solo movie is so much better because it's all CGI, or most of it is CGI. So if you have that as the bar that is set so high, this is not good enough. I'm sorry. And especially if you compare it with the train sequence of the previous chapter, which was mind-blowingly good, this is like, oh, no. Better redo this. I don't think this passes quality control for me. I still liked it, but I want to love what I see, not just merely like it. So it was okay, but it feels like a downgrade. And then the last thing that I think was bad is, I've already mentioned that, it's too short. The episode is too short, and I don't think that it has a proper ending, and it is unbalanced, and there's no payoff. So, yeah, that actually surprises me a little bit, because I think it is fixable in this episode. Now let's go to the ugly. What was really, really, really ugly in this chapter? I haven't done that before in my previous 2 reviews, but, well, as I said before, American Graffiti sequence, even CGI-wise, it's not so good. It doesn't convince. You can tell that it's doctored with, and no, it doesn't convince me. But what is truly ugly? I'll tell you what is. There is this big, ugly, walking carpet that I couldn't be happier to see. I will say no more. I've already said too much. What else is ugly? 2 ugly slugs. Really ugly. And I was so happy to see them in this episode because I was hoping that we would see them again. And then there is one very, very big, ugly, scary monster creature that I can't wait to see more of. And I know that we're going to see way more of this very, very, very ugly dude. Or actually, is it a dude? Could be a dudess. Could be female. I don't know. But anyway. Yeah, you know what? I'm just joking with you. The ugly in this episode was actually what I loved the most, because it's just so well executed, and it's so exciting it's just stuff that I did not expect in a TV show like this. It's really top notch. So all in all, did I like this episode? Duh. It's Star Wars, right? Is this a 10? A 10 out of 10? No. I think the previous episode, I would give that a 10 out of 10. Is it a 9 out of 10? No. An 8 out of 10, like chapter 1? No. Is it a 6? No. That's too low. There's way too much to enjoy here. I would say this is a 7 out of 10. So it's a 7 out of 10. And it could have been an 8 with some minor tweaks, but maybe there are some good reasons. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the episode after you've seen it. For those of you that don't want to be spoiled, of course, only read the comments after you've seen the episode, because it's kind of the Wild West out there. But let me know what you thought. Did you like the episode? What did you dislike? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Are there things that I've missed? Let me know. And subscribe to this channel. Make sure to do that, because from now on, every day, there will be a deep dive video. So previously I did huge deep dives, like episodes like 1 hour and 20 minutes long. But I'm going to do these shorter videos, but very much the same deep dive analysis of what we see and what may be the implications. And I have, I think, some theories that we need to talk about. So subscribe to the channel. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Share it if you want. And I would love to continue the conversation in the comments. All right, may the Force be with you. See you next time.